Only right here, right now, on the Hill. The first new look and a big turnaround in the biggest one of them all. I will share with you the brand new The Hill Decision Desk HQ forecast, where Kamala Harris is leading, by how much, and how Donald Trump can potentially close the gap. Plus, what about the Senate? And the other concern for Republicans, are they favored to keep the House? We have the latest numbers. It's brand new. I'll share it with you in a moment, along with the context and perspective from our experts. Also tonight, Congress answers the call.
In the United States of America, you do not get to attempt to assassinate our elected officials and our candidates. It's unacceptable.
Why the visit to Butler, Pennsylvania raised more questions than answers about the attempted Trump assassination. And the debate about the debates. Who actually needs it more, Trump or Harris? We're breaking it down here on The Hill. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is the most politically unpredictable show on all of television. You're watching The Hill on NewsNation. All right, so 71 days until Election Day and two very different strategies heading into Labor Day weekend, often seen as the moment when voters really start to dial in. Donald Trump laying a wreath at Arlington National Cemetery earlier today on the 3-year anniversary of Abbey Gate, when 13 American soldiers were killed during a bombing at the airport in Afghanistan during the U.S. withdrawal. And after that, shades, you could say, of Trump in 2016. Taking questions at a local business, then getting on his plane, flying to Michigan, speaking to members of the National Guard there, then taking more questions. Kamala Harris doing the complete opposite of Trump, and add to that, the opposite of Al Gore, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama. She has yet to reappear since the Democratic National Convention. That will change midweek. Now, as of right now, Trump's saying he believes that he is winning this race.
That's why millions of traditional Democrats, including FDR Democrats, JFK Democrats, independents, and old-fashioned liberals are joining our movement. Our poll numbers are great.
But our brand new, exclusive The Hill Decision Desk HQ forecast suggests otherwise. Now, this is not just a poll or even a collection of polls. Rather, it's a model that projects the chances of actually winning. It's brand new. The first look at the Trump-Harris race. Now, let's take a look here, for example, at the probability. Right now, the model currently predicts Vice President Harris having a 55% chance of winning the presidency. The last model, when President Biden was still in the race, had Trump's chance at 56%, for example. All right, let's zero in on the blue wall here. The three states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. You can see right there the movement. Right now, it predicts that Kamala Harris, as of this moment, would win all three states. Huge for Democrats and for her if that were to happen. But let's look at the other four swing states down in the South, throughout the Rust Belt, out west as well. Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. It shows Donald Trump winning. You can see in Nevada, Kamala Harris winning. Now, if you were to just take all of this at face value, just assume for a second this is right. What would the map look like? It would look just like that. And a possible Kamala Harris victory, showing her picking up 276 electoral college votes. You need 270 to win. What about the Senate and the House, right? Because the presidency, while it is the story, it is only part of it. The Senate right now, it projects, would flip, a 67% probability of that happening. The House, though, is essentially a toss-up right now, down to 56% for the GOP. Come on in, Scott Traynor, Data Science Director at Decision Desk HQ. Hello, Scott. Good to see you. Brand new numbers, brand new model. You had to put this thing on hold for a minute after Joe Biden dropped out of the race. Explain to me what it does before we dive into some of the numbers here.
Yeah, so what we had to look at is we had to reset all the polling. And so a lot of new polling came out after Joe Biden dropped out, and the polling looked a lot better for Kamala Harris than it did for Joe Biden. And so that's the reset there. The other thing that happened is RFK dropped out and again, had to recalibrate it there. But what you're looking at is basically a whole new presidential race, and it's razor thin.
A whole new race, razor thin, but it's a toss-up, right? Like, I laid out for you the movement there from Kamala Harris, and if all of this were to be accurate, you're looking at a win for her at 276, but both sides have a story to tell, do they not?
Both sides have a story. If I were either side, I would not look at these numbers comfortably. I would look at them as an opportunity to change the map if you're Donald Trump, and I would look at this as too close a margin to take anything for granted if you're the Harris campaign.
So let's go into these swing states. The blue wall, as of right now, is blue, and then when you head throughout the other 4 key states, that's where Donald Trump is favored in 3. What does that tell you right now, Scott? You've been digging into this and looking through this for days now. What does it tell you?
It tells me that the biggest shift in the race is in the Rust Belt, as we call it. When we were having this conversation 6-7 weeks ago, Donald Trump had the slight lead in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and that is switched. Now it could always switch back. There's 75 days to go, but that's probably the biggest shift. And the winner of the presidency is probably going to win those 3 states, or at least the majority of those 3 states. That's really where this race is going to be won or lost.
What's the most important one? Or 2?
Most important one is Michigan. Whoever wins Michigan has about a 90% chance of being the next president.
Either or, it doesn't matter whether it's Trump or Harris. Either one is essentially at that number. Huh.
Correct. That's the keystone right there. No pun intended to our former favorite state, Pennsylvania. But that one, it's highly correlated. Whoever wins Michigan's probably going to win Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and that's the easiest path to 270.
All right. To the beautiful building behind me here, because the presidential race is obviously the big one, but only part of it. 67% probability at this point in time that the Senate flips. But you're basically talking about, speaking of flip, a coin flip in the House, right?
Exactly. The House right now, just where we are in the polling, and it's early in the cycle, there's about 15 to 20 toss-up seats that right now look slight advantage of the Republicans. But again, 75 days to go, a lot of fundraising, a lot of campaigning. I would not be surprised if we have this conversation in a few weeks and it's 55% for the Democrats.
Wow. All right. Scott Tranter, Data Science Director, DDHQ, with the numbers and the breakdown. Thank you, sir. You got it. All right. Joining me today here on the Hill throughout the hour, Tia Mitchell, Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Chris Steyerwald, of course, host of The Hill Sunday, NewsNation political editor as well. Ashley Davis, former official in the George W. Bush White House. And Brad Howard is a Democratic strategist. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. Happy Monday. The numbers, break it down for me as you see it.
Well, Scott Tranter is a very smart man, but he is very wrong about Michigan. It's Pennsylvania, baby.
That's what I was just going to say. I was going to ask you that question, Chris.
You got it. Pennsylvania and I know what he's saying. He's not really wrong. I know what he's saying about where voters are breaking. But Pennsylvania is the biggest swing state. It is the fattest prize. It is the fattest calf in the barnyard. And you got to. An easy way to think about it is this. If any of the states south of the Mason-Dixon line go blue, Kamala Harris wins this election. If any of the states north of the Mason-Dixon that are on that 7-state map, any of those go red, Donald Trump's probably going to win.
So is that's his path, right? Because you look at this, and this feels like put Harris or Trump in a bag right now, close your eyes and pick a name out. That's probably close to where we are at this moment in time.
I think Democrats are probably in a little better place than that. But
you think so?
Yeah,
okay.
This is there's plenty of time, and I think what we're seeing now is Donald Trump has to disrupt the direction of this race, and so he's trying, right? So he's throwing stuff at it. But just as people look at the map and they think about this stuff, just remember, Trump has to win Arizona and Georgia and North Carolina, right. 100%. He's got to win them all or he's got no shot. He has to win all those and then flip one of those big 3 in the North.
You've been knocked back a little bit?
It's been actually, the thing I'm most excited about of those numbers is the Senate. I mean, the Senate still looks pretty strong. I understand right now that we're at 50-50 because the West Virginia seat definitely goes Republican, but
Manchin, who has stepped aside.
Exactly. But then you have Tester that's he's still down 5-6 points. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
He's down.
Yeah.
But I do think that no matter what happens in the presidency, I'm not a big believer that one party should have all three, House, Senate, and the White House. I think just horrible policy comes out of that. So if she does win and her momentum continues, I'm not convinced that her momentum continues after she starts talking to the press and maybe the
What's your takeaway there? Because there's clear movement for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, and I think when you're...
But there's still a long way to go. It feels like, they're both at the 50-yard line right now, right? But it feels like there's a long way to go.
Yeah, I think we are now heading to the end, if not at the end, of the base consolidation phase for Kamala's campaign.
Okay.
She had to come out. She had to explain to the base, motivate them. I'm your candidate. I can win. And here's why. And you look at Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, a lot of those voters there were the young voters that left the party over the Israel issue. Some of them were flirting with RFK Jr. All those issues are now done. I think she's consolidated her base, and she is starting now to get to swing voters where they are. There's a lot of complaints that she hasn't done press conferences or rolled out policy, but she is communicating.
We're going to get to that.
I know, but she's communicating to swing voters. They are hearing her message. They like what she's presenting, and she is now the candidate of change. She's the change agent in the race. And everybody who's fed up with our politics and tired of Trump and all that kind of stuff, they're going her direction right now. The key is she's got to finish that movement.
Tell me about Georgia, right? Because, as Chris said, if one of those states south go blue, it's potentially over. What are you seeing there?
So what's different in Georgia? Yes, Georgia went blue in 2020. Raphael Warnock won a full 6-year term in 2022. In 2024, neither Warnock nor Ossoff are on the ballot. It's basically just the presidential contest, no other statewide races. Yes, we have Congress. Yes, we have state legislature. Let's just say the way the maps are drawn, not as many toss-up districts there to really fire up people for the general election, which means Harris and Trump have to do it on their own in Georgia, quite frankly, this cycle. And that makes it harder for Democrats, quite frankly. Georgia is still, every other statewide elected official in Georgia is a Republican except for Raphael Warnock.
Right.
And yes, Warnock is going to campaign hard for Harris, but at the end of the day, his name isn't on the ballot.
So to your point real quick, though, Arizona, the opposite. We have a very competitive Senate race in Arizona. Now there's an abortion question that's on the ballot. And so I think those two things are really going to help motivate Democrats in Arizona. And I think Harris probably has a stronger chance of winning Arizona now because of those things.
Which is why you see, going back to Georgia, which is why you see Trump making amends with the governor, Governor Kemp.
Are you suggesting that is cynical political interest there? That is newfound love of Brian Kemp?
Let me leave you.
But I would like.
Let me leave Chris with this real quick, because I wrote down when Brad was talking about RFK Jr.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't had the chance to talk about this since he got out last week. He was running, Chris, at about 2.5%, which is generally a post-convention bounce of the last 20 years, give or take on average.
Sure, yeah.
So when the new numbers start to come out with the RFK factor, where do you think this race moves, or does it not?
I'm skeptical that it will move that much. We'll see. The question with RFK is the juice worth the squeeze, right?
For Trump.
Yeah, so you want that couple of points, right? If you're Donald Trump, especially in Arizona, where it's going to be hell for leather for Republicans getting through this, and you alluded to the Kari Lake race out there. Though we interviewed Kari Lake on the Sunday show this week, and she was very on message. She was very chill. The old Kari Lake was not around. She was not caliente. She was very chill. For Republicans, they want those RFK voters in Arizona. The question is, how long until Donald Trump has to disavow Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? I'd say you start the clock now, right? And until then, until the point where Trump has to say, actually, I'm unaccepting your endorsement because I don't want to deal with this trouble.
It's interesting that you say you found Kari Lake to be chill.
Chill.
I could tell you in interviewing lawmakers on this show over the last few weeks, that's one thing I've noticed.
Message discipline.
And they've got races to run too, right? We talk about the presidential race all the time, and rightfully so, but you noticed it, I've noticed it. It's a little bit of what's going on. All right, some of the numbers from DDHQ, The Hill, the forecast, we'll get to more of it throughout the hour. Still to come here on The Hill, reaction from Kamala Harris's campaign, how they view the state of the race, plus Trump today unveiling what his second term could look like as it relates to the military.
Investing heavily in drones, robotics, artificial intelligence, hypersonics.
So, could the military be headed for a $1 trillion budget? And can we afford that? We're asking a top Republican coming up here on the Hill. Plus, the debate about the debates. Both campaigns going at it with each other. We think it's going to happen, but who needs it to happen more? Steyerwalt will break that down. Hello from Washington. Nice to have you in. For the facts, the context, the perspective, welcome to the Hill. Welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. 71 days left until November 5th, but no activity today from the Vice President Kamala Harris. Harris is scheduled to start a bus tour in Georgia on Wednesday. But if you look at recent history, let's go back to 2000, for example, Democratic presidential nominees typically have hit the trail much harder immediately after the Democratic National Convention. On the Mondays following the convention, for example, Al Gore campaigned in Mississippi and Illinois. John Kerry, Michigan and Missouri. Hillary Clinton held a rally in Nebraska. Barack Obama didn't even wait that long. He was out on the trail the very next day. The recent exception, though, President Biden. Last go around, 4 years ago, of course, as we know, an election that was shaped by COVID. Joining us now is Lindy Lee. She is a member of the Harris-Walz National Finance Committee. Lindy, thanks for being with us. First time, I believe, here on the Hill. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
You got it. So President Biden was criticized, as you know, in 2020 for running the so-called basement strategy. Is Kamala Harris doing that now? It sure feels like it.
Oh, absolutely not. She's going to be down in Georgia on a bus tour. And even before the convention, she was in Western Pennsylvania on a bus tour. She's not letting a single day go to waste. And the reason why she's doing these smaller scale events is that her epic rallies are gigantic with tens of thousands of people. A small face-to-face interaction, nothing beats that at all. And she's going to be in Pennsylvania and Georgia and all the blue wall states, including Michigan, Wisconsin, and as I mentioned, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the ball game. That's where I am here today. And even without Josh Shapiro on the ticket, I'm absolutely confident that she can continue her lead, as demonstrated by the New York Times Siena poll that came out.
Let me ask you that. So we just unveiled the Hill DDHQ forecast. I heard you just say a lead. But when I spoke with Dan Cannon, the Battleground States director, the other day, he described Kamala Harris as the underdog. We heard from Tim Walz at the DNC, in his words, I'm paraphrasing here, say that you're down 3, but driving down the field late in the game. It seems like the Democrats are embracing this underdog role, but I just showed you the numbers, and I just heard you say you're leading. Is there a shift in tone? Is Kamala Harris leading this race as the campaign sees it?
I'm trying not to be overly optimistic. And obviously the line that they're adopting is a smart one. We should never rest on our laurels, and we should play like we're 10 points behind. So that is the correct tone. But I am absolutely delighted to see the ground that she's making up in Pennsylvania. She is giving us a fighting chance that we did not have, unfortunately, under President Biden. She is putting states that were previously out of play back in play, like Georgia.
Why not embrace it, though?
Michigan is back in play. We had completely lost that, under President Biden, especially given the resentment and just angst over the Gaza issue. So I'm very confident that she has many paths to 270.
Let me ask you about one of her main issues, price gouging, quote unquote, as she calls it, or as some would call it, price controls. There is a big case going on that started today, Kroger and Albertsons. You go anywhere in the Midwest, for example, you see those two. The Biden administration has been a pretty big foe of big business, Lindy. It blocked, for example, the JetBlue Spirit merger under review right now, Alaska and Hawaiian Airlines, Kroger, Albertsons right now, U.S. Steel and Nippon. Why has the administration taken that stance, and is Kamala Harris going to embrace that?
Because right now, a lot of corporations are taking advantage of supply chain issues and even the pandemic to jack up prices. What we're seeing is greedflation, not just inflation. We want to put the responsibility where it lies. It's at the feet of the corporation.
Kroger says it'll lower prices by $1 billion, add $1 billion to the customer experience, and increase wages by $1.3 billion. Are they lying?
They say it all the time. Every single time there's a merger and acquisition, that's the line that they take. Obviously, they're not going to say anything otherwise. And let me tell you, I come from a communist regime. Okay, so my family fled an authoritarian regime. I can tell you what, right now Republicans are accusing Kamala Harris of communism. This isn't communism. Communism is a communist regime killing your great-grandfather. Communism is forcing your family to flee a country because of the violence and the egregious practices of the government. This isn't it. She is simply trying to give middle-class Americans a fighting chance. She understands that prices are still too high. Yes, inflation is coming down. Yes, economic indicators suggest that the situation is improving, but prices are still too high. And she feels that. She comes from the middle class. She understands Americans' pain, and she's going to do something about it by calling out the corporations who are exploiting.
Lindy Lee, got to leave it there. Got to leave it there. Finance Committee for the Harris-Walz team. Appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You got it. Obviously, she's telling her story there. Seemed to get a little emotional. I hear her there. It sounded like. I wonder what you make of the reasoning and the strategy not to put Kamala Harris out there.
Because I would think. It's your party, but that's what happened with
Biden.
With Secretary Clinton, with Hillary Clinton, and she was winning, and then all of a sudden she didn't win. So if you're an underdog, you're fighting harder.
It's also, as Democrats, compared to the Republicans at least, we consistently have a turnout problem in the sense that our voters are facing, voter disenfranchisement laws that Republicans are passing. They are single moms who work multiple jobs, like they're the impoverished. Like, it is hard to get people out to vote in art. And so we want them always thinking that they are absolutely necessary, that it is worth standing in line 2 to 3 hours because we need your vote, every vote to win. And you want that motivation in every single base voter.
I love that Al Gore campaigning in Mississippi. That is adorable. Truly adorable. If the whole name of the game in politics is if things are going in the direction you want them to go, let them keep going. Don't do anything to break it up. In 2020, Republicans complained bitterly about Joe Biden's basement campaign. Basement campaign was great for Joe Biden. That was a great campaign for Joe Biden. Going to Georgia is a bold stroke, but not too bold.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there are people at home saying we haven't seen enough of Kamala Harris on the trail. Like, I get it, she's taken a couple of days off, and that's not what candidates normally do coming out of the convention, but I don't think she's taken so much time away that people haven't seen her recently.
All right, still to come here on the Hill. Much more ahead over the next half hour, including Donald Trump at Arlington National Cemetery today. What brought him there? And is it Elon Musk to the rescue? How NASA needs the billionaire to bail him out. You're watching The Hill. Stay with us. We're back in 4 minutes. The Hill on NewsNation. A congressional task force investigating the assassination attempt on Donald Trump toward the shooting site earlier today in Butler, Pennsylvania. The group of lawmakers, both Republicans and Democrats, walked the grounds and met with local law enforcement officials. They also climbed onto the roof of the building where the gunman fired shots at Trump, getting a look firsthand at how close he was to the former president.
It raises more questions than we came here with today because we can see it's not a large place. We can get a sense of the area and just how close these buildings were to that stage where President Trump stood that day.
But in the United States of America, you do not get to attempt to assassinate our elected officials and our candidates. It's unacceptable.
Now, since the assassination attempt, we've seen, for example, the head of the United States Secret Service resign, several Secret Service agents reassigned, and now Trump, in his first outdoor rally, as we saw the other day, is behind bulletproof glass. Joining us now, the Republican congressman from the state of California, Tom McClintock. Congressman, thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. Appreciate your time, sir. Always nice to speak with you. I was remembering today and rewatching an interaction that you had with Christopher Wray earlier this summer, the FBI director, Congressman, in which you said your biggest concern were lone wolves. And I wonder if that's still your biggest concerns right now.
I actually don't recall saying that. I think he said that. My concern is that for the last 4 years, our borders have been wide open. When we abandoned Afghanistan, we released 5,000 of the most dangerous terrorists on the planet. One of them, 10 days later, showed up at Abbey Gate and killed those 13 U.S. service members whose deaths we marked the 3rd anniversary of yesterday. We don't know where the others are, but I think it's a good bet that more than a few have come in through our open southern border. We know there's been a 3,000% increase in suspected terrorists that we have been able to apprehend compared to the Trump years. We don't know how many are among the 2 million known gotaways that we watched cross the border but couldn't stop. This is becoming a grave danger, and in the words of Christopher Wray, a massive security threat to our country.
Let me ask you about something that Donald Trump said earlier today. Part of the theme for him today was the military. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
We will make a historic investment in building a U.S. military for the 21st century, investing heavily in drones, robotics, artificial intelligence, hypersonics.
Congressman, you're on the Budget Committee. I was looking through our military spending in the recent years, $820 billion, $886 billion. It's basically going up 5%, 6%, 7%, give or take, every year. Are we headed to $1 trillion military budget? And do you think that's appropriate?
Well, I've always agreed with what Ronald Reagan said about that. He said defense is not a budget issue. You spend what you need to spend in order to defend the country. The problem
do we need a $1 trillion budget?
The problem is we have trillions and trillions of dollars of excessive domestic spending that have run up the worst deficit in history. And the interest costs now on our accumulated debt exceed our entire defense budget. So I believe that major reductions are going to need to be made in the non-defense side. But defense is dictated not by our wants and needs; it's dictated by world events.
So let me ask you about the non-defense side, because we're in the middle of this election, as you know. Donald Trump said this today. J.D. Vance said this in the recent days as well. And I want your reaction on the other side.
No tax on tips. It caught on like crazy. No tax on tips.
President Trump has been on the record for a long time supporting a bigger child tax credit. Mm-hmm. And I think he wanted to apply to all American families.
No tax on tips, a child tax credit, 2.5 times what is now. Donald Trump also talking about no tax on your Social Security. It seems like a lot's for free out there. And I just wonder, Congressman, as a Republican, what you're going to cut and how you're going to pay for these things that Donald Trump's talking about. Because in the Trump years, fiscal year 2018, he ran a $780 billion deficit. In 2019, Donald Trump ran a $984 billion deficit.
Yeah, no, that is a very serious problem and a valid criticism. The only thing I'd say in his defense is that the Democrats kept saying we had to spend more money even faster. But you're absolutely right. The good news is there is an enormous amount that can be cut. Starting with congressional earmarks that are a constitutional abomination. But
those are fractions of a penny on a dollar. You know that.
Well, that does add up, but more than that, it greases the skids for a lot of the $1 trillion waste that we're seeing in subsidies to prop up failing businesses and green energy cronies of the left, of the unauthorized appropriations that we continue to shovel money at without ever reviewing these programs, and the grants that literally rob St. Petersburg to pay St. Paul, take the tax revenues from one community and spend them on projects that benefit exclusively some other community. There is a great deal that needs to be and must be cut from the budget. And if we don't do it now, I think market forces will require us to do it in the very near future. Because before you can provide for the common defense, you have to be able to pay for it. And the ability of our country to do so is coming into grave question.
Social Security and Medicare, we're going to be getting something like 70 cents on the dollar in a decade's time, and nobody here in Washington seems to have the will to address that. Congressman, we could talk about it all day, but we got to leave it there. Congressman McClintock from California. Appreciate it, sir. Talk to you soon.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You got it. So we've talked about this. This is the election where a lot of things are free.
Right.
And you heard it out of Donald Trump today. Again, no tax on tips. And, I just wonder if we're headed to $1 trillion worth of military spending and how any of this gets paid for. You were laughing in the middle of that interview. I'll get to that in a second as a Democrat. But these I just wonder the way forward.
So we called it modern monetary policy. And what it means is the debt doesn't matter and deficits don't matter. In the 1990s, Ross Perot taught both parties a lesson that the debt and the deficit can be made to matter to people, that voters can care about those things. And we had a balanced budget. At the beginning of this century, we had a balanced budget. We actually had a little tiny budget surplus. For young people, believe it or not, there was a time in American politics where the central debate in a presidential election was about what to do with a budget surplus. And now, and this is the worst indictment of both parties, even when the economy's good, we still run trillion-dollar deficits. And that's shameful. That is robbing our grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
And that's what the governors argue. I know you want to go real quick. The governors are arguing right now because a lot of their states are doing budget surpluses. And they're like, if we're doing it in our state.
Some of that was COVID money that they got.
But they're still, it's not anymore. I mean, that stopped, and they're still doing surpluses. Even Shapiro in Pennsylvania has a surplus.
Well, actually, my mom told me never to interrupt you, so I'm always going to defer to you. Let you go. No, but I'll say two things. I'll say, number one, former Blue Dog spokesperson,
centrist middle.
Centrist Democrats has been fiscal responsibility. No party can credibly claim to be fiscally responsible of the last 20 years. I think the problem is voters aren't rational on this issue either. Voters want lower taxes and more services, and that's part of the problem. But what's interesting, what he pointed out is he said he's frustrated by these unauthorized grants, but that earmarks are an abomination. And so those two things don't square away. Like earmarks are congressionally directed spending. You want Congress deciding where the money goes, not left to unelected bureaucrats.
You want to fight you. You better quantify Tom McClintock.
A big, strong military, I think most, if not all in this country want. You just got to wonder, though, at what point are we getting to $1 trillion budget, given that we're at $35 billion and counting the debt? All right, by the way, and to mark the 3-year anniversary of the Abbey Gate bombing that killed 13 Americans during the Afghanistan withdrawal, former President Trump participated today in wreath-laying ceremonies at Arlington National Cemetery. The former president there just down the road from us. Around the table we go. T, I'll start with you. What do you see there?
Well, I mean, I see Donald Trump looking very solemn, and I don't want to politicize what should be a day to honor troops who died trying to do what they were ordered to do, which is try to, close out U.S. occupation in Afghanistan. But unfortunately, it is politicized. And I do think Republicans see this as, Joe Biden's Benghazi or whatever else you want to hold up there. And I do wonder if it was a missed opportunity. Yes, Biden and Harris did put out statements.
Yeah, she wasn't.
But both of them, didn't have really public events today. And I think that was a choice, given the criticism they faced on it.
Why do you think she didn't? Because she could have gone today, or
Absolutely.
could have done something, or could have met with families publicly. And these are decisions. Every day in the presidential race, you have choices. And clearly the choice was made not to.
I wonder, again, I don't have any inside information, but I wonder if she was deferring to the president on this, if this is one of those things where she's letting Biden take the lead, or if she just decided not to adjust her calendar because, again, she is going dark post-debate. But either way, it was a choice, and I wonder if maybe they could have done something today.
All right, still to come here on the Hill is the first presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump in jeopardy. Steyerwalt is going to break down where the campaigns stand and why one of the candidates in particular needs to debate more than the other. Do you have an idea of who that might be? Steyerwalt breaking it down on the other side of the break. Back in 3.
I've seen a lot of crazy things in my career, but even I was shocked when I opened my mail recently. You won't believe what the happy face killer sent me, and you'll only see it on NewsNation.
Banfield, Wednesday, 10/9 Central, only on NewsNation.
So the debate over the presidential debates is back. The Harris and Trump campaigns debating over what the rules should be for the September 10th matchup. Now, unlike the previous Biden-Trump debate, Kamala Harris's campaign does not want the microphones muted. Trump is fighting back.
We agreed to the same rules and same specifications. And I think that's probably what it should be. But they're trying to change it. The truth is they're trying to get out of it because she doesn't want to debate. She's not a good debater. She's not a smart person. She doesn't want to debate.
And here we are, Steyerwalt here to break it all down. Chris?
Okay, so let's begin at the beginning.
Yes.
Because if there's this weirdness going on, we should start with what actually happened. So We started the process on the debate about debates way back in May of 2024 of this year, when Biden and Trump agreed to 2 debates, one on CNN and one on ABC. The ABC one for September 10th. And then you see there, June 15th, what did they agree? We'll have muted microphones. And the Biden campaign thought this would be good for them because Trump would not talk over Biden and it would be better this way. Womp womp. So they have the debate in July, as you'll recall, and silence was not the friend of the incumbent president. And in fact, it would have been much better for Joe Biden if Donald Trump could have been interjecting and interrupting, because Biden was struggling to fill dead air and fill time, quite a lot of it. Okay. We also know what happened in July is, you saw the picture on the left side of your screen there change. Joe Biden left, Kamala Harris came in. So the debates are still on, right? The existing debate is still on. Donald Trump says, let's renegotiate. We're not going to have that debate. On August 3rd, he says, I'm out of the ABC debate. And he says the only debate that he will ever possibly do is with Fox News in front of a packed audience in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris says, nah. And she says, I'm going to show up for the debate that was arranged with the nominee before me, and I'll be there, see if you'll show. Trump, you see 5 days later, says, actually, what I meant to say was I totally will do that debate, and I am coming back, and then proposes 2 more, one with Fox and one with NBC. Harris agrees to the NBC debate, but where are we today? So we've got 2 on the calendar. We've got one for September 10th, which is now 15 days away, and we've got one later in the month in September on NBC. What's the debate over microphones about? What are we doing here? Donald Trump today basically indicated that he might drop out of the debate. He trashed George Stephanopoulos, the presumed moderator for the ABC debate, and created real questions about whether he'd actually participate. Why is Donald Trump negotiating, not really getting out of the debate? Here's why. Look at the state of the race. Here's the magic number. Who needs a debate? The person who needs a debate is the person who is losing. And Donald Trump is losing. And this number is significant because remember what I tell you all the time. You need, if you're a Democrat, to win the national popular vote by about 3.5 points, because that's how much more Republican the swing states are than the nation as a whole. You need that Kentucky windage to get through in the swing states. Kamala Harris, here in this new average of polls from the Hill and Decision Desk HQ Election Center, so good, her average is now outside of that number. Donald Trump's behind. He needs the debate. Whatever he says about microphones or not microphones or doing it, standing on his head, he's going to do it because he needs it.
Steyerwalt breaks it down. So there's a lot of Republicans who are just hoping that Donald Trump stays on message.
Yeah.
And that would, I think, sort of conflict with the primetime hour-and-a-half debate.
Who wants those microphones muted? Who wants those microphones muted? It's not Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris does not want the microphones muted because she would like Donald Trump to be living out loud, to be his complete self on that stage. Donald Trump probably doesn't want the microphones muted because he has a lot to say. I can guarantee you that the professionals working for Donald Trump, Chris LaCivita, Susie Wiles, and other smart Republicans who know, say, keep the mute on. Don't let him do. Because we remember in the first debate with Joe Biden, who knows what would have happened with Joe Biden in 2020 if Donald Trump hadn't chewed up the scenery and yelled over everybody and done all of that. And there's a good argument to be made. That's where Trump lost the 2020 election. I think this time, if I was a Trump campaign, I would say, boss, we're doing everything we can to get those mutes off. And then right out of the other side of my mouth, say to ABC, keep those mics muted.
Yeah. Is this sort of like Trump negotiating art of the deal type stuff, or is there no method to the madness here?
I'm sure there's a method to his madness. I don't know what it is, but I do think that he did come back later this afternoon and kind of go back on it and say now he is.
Yeah, he's been all over the place.
So, I mean, I think that, but I think you're right. It's going to, I actually think he'll be disciplined.
You think
in the debate?
Discipline Trump?
Because if he criticizes her as a woman or calls her a name or interrupts her, and it's going to be much different debating her than anybody else because he hasn't debated a woman. And if he makes
Hillary Clinton was definitely
that's true. That's true. I was thinking the primary because he wouldn't do. But I mean, sorry. I just think he can be disciplined.
Look, I think if a frog had wings, he wouldn't bump his backside when he hopped. I think it's hard for Donald Trump to be disciplined.
I think. Look, there's this constant battle with Donald Trump, and do you let Donald Trump be Donald Trump, and that's what got him the victory in the first place? No one thought Donald Trump was ever going to be nominated, more or less, win the presidency, but he bulldozed through. Do you let him be his authentic self, which his base loves, or do you apply so much structure that it kind of quietens him down and he starts losing some of that appeal? I think is a concern as well. But I think all in all, like, these debates are going to be of the most consequential we have probably.
Well, the last one was pretty consequential because it totally changed the race. Speaking of, I'll give you the last word on where we started, which was Kamala Harris at 55% probability in the Hill DDHQ forecast.
I just want to say, yes, she's ahead, and so that would say that Trump needs the debate, but I do think Kamala Harris needs the debate. We were just talking earlier about all this talk about what they want to do and spin. It's time for both of these candidates to get into specifics, but Kamala Harris is the one who's seen more, it's been considered more of a liability that she hasn't. I think she needs the debate to tell her critics that she actually can explain her platform and put some meat behind it.
By the way, speaking of liabilities, have you seen what's going on in space with Boeing? My goodness. Elon Musk to the rescue, I guess you could say. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, joins us on the other side of the break. All right, welcome back here to the Hill. And a blow to Boeing. NASA is calling upon Elon Musk's SpaceX to help bring back the astronauts that are stranded on the International Space Station. The Boeing Starliner shuttle that brought them is experiencing big tech problems. The astronauts traveled to the space station in early June and were supposed to stay there for 8 days. Today marks day number 82, and Leland Vittert. Now SpaceX has to jump in. There were contracts that were awarded a decade ago. SpaceX got $2.6 billion. Boeing, $4.2 billion. Starliner has not completed a single crew mission, 10 for SpaceX.
Space programs are like golf. When they start going south, they go to Antarctica pretty quick.
Leila was just telling me about this weekend.
Yeah, my weekend golf game.